Welcome back, friends. This is Fraser from FF Art Studio. Friends, hope you all are doing fine. Let's learn to rig a pendulum in Maya. So let's get started. So let's first create the pendulum model. So let's first take a cube and create the support for the pendulum. We'll create a supporting sphere, soften the edges. Now let's create the pendulum chains. With the first bob of the pendulum done, we'll just combine the two meshes here. Move its pivot to the vertex at the top from where the rotation will take place, and just name it from the outliner bob1 underscore mesh, since this is the first set of the bob or the pendulum. So we'll create a couple more by duplicating and name them as bob 2 and 3 respectively. Once naming all the parts are done, select all of them, delete all by type history, freeze transformations, group them together. So we can name them as pendulum underscore grp for the group. Yeah, so the model is done. So friends, with the pendulum model done, it's now time for rigging. As you can see from the outliner as well as from the viewport, we have the support mesh, we have the bob 1 mesh, the bob 2 mesh, and the bob 3 mesh. Basically divided this into 3 parts so that we can understand the process of rigging a little better, and it will be much interesting while animating it as well, applying the principles. So for the first thing, what we can notice over here, although we have the pivot in the right position while we modeled it, if we rotate it, this will rotate individually. Whereas if we rotate this is going to rotate individually. So they are not connected to each other. Okay. What it should have happened, that if you would have selected this, even the one below that should have been selected at the same time. So from the beginning, everything should be connected, right? So in order to do that, we'll be using a p-parent method. In other words, we'll be using a method where we'll be parenting using this parent option under the edit menu and having the shortcut of P, okay, from the keyboard. So how it works is, if this is the one which is going to be controlled, this is the child. And if this is the one, if this mesh is the one which is going to control this another mesh, which is the child, then this one which is going to control it, call it the parent basically. So from there you have the word called parent, because parents have are senior to us. So basically it's about the seniority and the hierarchy. So this is senior to this, so this is the child and this is the parent. So let's see how we do it. It's done. It's very simple. Just select the one which is going to be controlled and shift select the one which is going to control it. That means the child first and then the parent, and just hit P, which is a shortcut for parenting in the keyboard. As we do that, we can notice once we are selecting the parent, the child is also being selected together. If we check out in the outliner, we can see that the bob 2 mesh holds the bob 3 mesh within it. Okay, as we have parented it, it's almost forming like a group within that mesh. Okay, so we continue with that with the next bob mesh also. So now, since the bob 2 along with the bob 3 is the child and the one which is going to control it is the bob 1 mesh, so we'll shift select the bob 1 mesh. So we have the child and then we have the parent, and we hit E, parent. So as you can see, when we select the bob 1 mesh, now the entire chain of bob 2 and bob 3 meshes are selected together, since they are in a hierarchy now within each other, or we can say it's got parented. So now if we select E and rotate it, we can see all are going together. If we rotate this, even the one below that is going together. Now we are left with the support. We'll select the Bob 1 mesh and shift select. We will shift select the support mesh, which is going to be the parent, and we'll hit P. That's it. So that's done. Okay. The outliner also you can see it's all within that. Always notice that this pivot should be over here on top. You can hold D. You can move the pivot individually. So it is not dependent upon the mesh. Now it's released the mesh. So now with that selected, or with D, holding D on, if you press X along with it, you can snap this to the grid. Okay. So now that we have it snapped to the grid, and if we turn the wireframe on, you can see it is in the right position. Since we modeled it in the correct position, so it's in the middle of the support. So with that done, and with all our meshes having the correct pivots, okay, in the right position, so that the rotation takes place properly, now it's time for us to head towards creating the joints. So starting with the rigging and creating the joints, first thing you need to know is whether you have this tab where you have the skeleton, where you have the skin, deformers, constraints, all there or not. If it's not there, change the workspace from general or standard or whatever you're using to this rigging workspace. Okay, and then whatever tabs you require, whatever menu you require will be present in front of you, okay, on your viewport. Along with that, you can check out this to be rigging if you don't do it from the workspace. So from this, if it is in modeling, you can change to rigging. So that will also change your menu bar. Okay, so keep that in mind. Don't look for it and don't bang your head searching for it. You can just change from here, or you can change the workspace directly. Either way, as well as you will get some shortcuts on the shelf. Okay, it's already present some of the important tools which are required. So if you're working with the normal modeling is open as default, you can just switch to the rigging shelf, and you will find all the shortcuts here for rigging as well. So that's one tip before starting off with rigging. First, we need to create a joint chain. Okay, so in order to create a joint chain, as we know, for rigging a mesh, it's very important that we have the joints in the proper position, because the joints are going to control the mesh. Just like we have joints and the skeletal structure in our body, which controls our muscles and our limbs and appendages and every part. Same way, whether it's an organic, any character or any prop, any mechanical object which we are trying to rig for animation, we need to set up the joint structure very appropriately, and the joints to be placed in the proper position from where we want the animation to take place and the movements to take place. Okay, so let's start creating the joints. So for creating the joints, select from the skeleton menu. We just scroll to the first option, you'll get the create joint option over there. So by hitting that, you will get the option for creating joint, which is also present over here in the rigging shelf over here. Okay, so let's begin. First thing is, if you would like to press the 4 button in order to see the position of the joint. Okay, so there will be first joint will be placed over here, so just click over there. Next, obviously the Bob 1 is going to rotate from here, so we'll just click there. Okay, next Bob 2 is going to rotate from here, so we just click there. Don't click anywhere else and just keep creating the chain. Next, the Bob 3 is going to rotate from here, so we'll just click it here, and then you click it here for the end joint. Okay, and just hit enter. Okay, so once you hit enter, you'll see you have the joint already ready. Joint chain is already ready. Okay, now with the shaded mode on, you can see the joints are already within the mesh. Okay, so in order to see it clearly, you can click on this XY joint option. So by that you can see the joints visible through the mesh. Okay, now the first things first, we need to position it properly and accurately. Although it's already there, but still we need to position it accurately. So you can check from the side view what is the position. So almost looks okay, but we need to snap it to the vertex. So just hit W to get this gizmo, and we need to snap it along this vertex, okay, or you can say you can snap it along the grid over here, okay. So by hitting X, just snap it, okay. Check from the right view. So it's already snapped. So this first one has the right position. The second one has to be, this one has to be snapped with the vertex over here, okay, from the you can say bob one pivot point. So since it's a vertex, we'll hit V. So pressing V for vertex and just drag it there. If you look from perspective view or side view, you can see that it has snapped to the front vertex and not the middle vertex. So you can just from the side view just hit V and drag it along here. So it's very important to check the position properly from the front as well as from the side view. You can do it, you can do the same thing. Instead of front and side 2 times, you can directly do it using the perspective view if you have good control over it, okay. So that's there. And then next, so don't forget we are holding, and please don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed to my channel. That's it. We are selecting the joint, okay. Let's say we are doing this one, and then we are holding V and we are just dragging it to snap into the right vertex. Okay, now to the end joint, same thing, just select the end joint and snap it to the right vertex. Now if you check from the side view, if you select this main joint, okay, you can see they are all aligned in the proper position from the front as well as from the side view, okay. So all the joints are present within the mesh, okay. Next thing is, if you want to increase or decrease the size of the joint chain or the joints, okay, normally the joints should be within the mesh, okay. So if you want to make it little smaller so that it goes completely within the mesh, you can just hop along here to display, and under display under animation tab you will find the joint size option. So currently it was set to 0.3. If you want to make it little smaller, you can make it 0.2. So as you can see, the display of the joint display size changes to 0.2. So now it goes within the mesh, but you can see it as well from the front view, okay. So that looks fine. So the first step of creating the joint and the joint chain and positioning it in the right position is done. Now slightly come along to the outliner, and if you just open up this joint hierarchy, we'll notice that they are all placed in the correct hierarchy, with this is being the child, the end joint, this is the first one, second, third, and this is the main joint. So we'll just follow the same naming conventions we've used for the mesh. Since this is the first and the main joint, we just name it the main joint, and no need of one, so we just rename that. Now coming to this, okay, this joint is basically going to control the bob one mesh, okay. So we'll name this as, so you can just copy the name from here, bob one, and we'll just paste this here, Control V, give a space, and just delete the 2. So we have the bob one joint named. Next, this is the bob 2 joint, so we'll just copy that, bob 1, make it 2, and sorry, pardon me, okay, joint. Next, okay. Okay, so there you go, we have the bob 2 joint, and then we have the bob 3 joint. And since this one is the final joint, or it ends here, we'll just name it end joint, END, and we just remove this D. Okay, so there you go, naming our joints are done. So we've named the joints, with this being the main joint, this being the bob 1 joint, it's going to control the bob 1, this is the bob 2, this is the bob 3, and this is the end joint, okay. Next we'll move on to a very important major part, is where we attach the mesh to the joints, or the joints to the mesh, because the joints are going to control the mesh, okay. So in order to do that, so first we are selecting the main joint, So that selects the whole joint chain, and then we shift select the mesh, okay, or the support mesh, which has the whole mesh hierarchy. Okay, so the parent and then the child in this case. And then in order to bind it, we'll move to skin menu just beside the skeleton menu. Under the skin menu, in the first option, you'll get the bind skin option. Okay, so we just click on the option box. As you can see, there are various settings over here. So we don't need to do any changes. You can just reset it once. So this is the default setting, what you will see. So bind to joint hierarchy, we'll leave it as it is so that it joins along to the hierarchy. Binding method for this case will change it from closest distance to closest in hierarchy. So just make this change, closest in hierarchy, binding method, and then hit apply. So once we hit apply, you can put this off and just select. We can see the joint chain has now got colored. So each and individual joint has a different color. You can see this is blue, this is green, this is kind of light green, this kind of yellowish, this is kind of orange kind of color. Okay, so each and every individual joint has got a color. And if you select the mesh, you can see in the channel box alongside, you can see that it has got a skin cluster. So basically this skin cluster node which connects or binds the mesh to the joint, okay, to the joint chain. So this is the first skin cluster one. And if we select the joint, you can see there are 4 skin clusters over here with a bind pose. Okay, we can also see that the attributes of the mesh have been locked over here as we did the skin bind process. Okay, so that's done. Very simple. Just select the parent main joint, then select the main mesh. If it is combined together, well and good, you have only one mesh. If it is not combined and it's parented, select the parent mesh. Okay, shift select the parent mesh and then go to skin. Under skin, you have the bind skin option box. Just change this to closest in hierarchy and then hit apply and it gets binded. Now all that talking, let's see what's happened over here. So now if we select the main joint and move it, you can see it's all going together. If we rotate it, it's all rotating together. If we scale it, it's all scaling together. Okay, but there's an issue over here. Okay, so we'll fix that up now. Since we have just binded it with the joint structure, the next step is very important. If we rotate it, we'll notice there's some issue with the mesh over here. This is because the influence of the joints, the calculation the software has done is based on some algorithm which it follows, but we need to tweak it as it should be. So coming to the next and very important part of rigging, painting the skin weights. Painting the skin weights properly. So let's check that out. So basically the mesh is the skin, you can see, and the joint is controlling that skin. So the weights or the influence of the joints on each and every mesh or vertex has to be proper so that it works fine for animation and does not influence the unrequired parts of the mesh. So in order to fix that, we will be doing the skin painting manually. For that, we can select the primary mesh over here first, and then with that selected, we can hop on to the skin option. Under the skin menu, you will find the paint skin weights. So you can just hit on the option box over here and you will get a nice drop down for all the joints over here which are influencing this mesh. Okay, so this is basically a painting tool or tab or palette. We have all the settings required for painting it. Now it's worth noticing that there are certain portions which are white and certain are black. So what does this mean? So with the mesh selected and the selection over here with the main joint, it shows us the influence of the main joint. So the white portions are where the main joint is influencing, and the black portions are where the main joint is not influencing, and the gray portions are where the main joint is influencing slightly. So in order to influence it completely or not influence it completely, it should either be white completely or black completely. Okay, not gray. Okay, because this is a hard surface kind of model and an inorganic objects, not organic. So we don't need that kind of deformation for it. Okay, so how do you do that? So this value over here basically shows us the color. So black means no color of black is 0. And if you crank up the value to 1, then the value is full or the influence is full. And in other words, the color will become white for that. Okay, so now with this brush, as you can see the brush icon over here, if you click on B and if we drag with the left mouse button, okay, just drag it, we can increase or decrease the brush size. With that set and with the value set to full or 1, which gives us the white color, we want this portion of the support to be controlled by this main joint fully. So we'll just paint it white. Okay, so just drag along the vertex. By dragging along the vertex, we can get the paint on it. We also need to paint this mesh, okay, the first sphere, which is along with the support. So just reduce the brush size a bit with B, left click, drag, and just paint over it. So this is a very interesting process while rigging. Although it's a technical stuff, but we are also painting and doing some creative stuff on the way. So that looks good. Okay, so we can see the support is now being controlled by the main joint. Okay, but we don't want it to control this bob one. Okay, so that means we need to make it black. So for doing that, just turn down the value to 0 to get the black color, and we just need to paint on this bob. Keep in mind that the paint is done on the vertices. Now these meshes are very low poly mesh, especially the cylinders, so they don't have any vertex in the middle, right? They don't have any edges in the middle. The only vertex they have is over here. So we'll get it black or get it to paint only if we click near a vertex. So by doing that, you can see that we have got this first joint sorted out. Let's check it once. Let's hit Q. Let's turn on the joint view. Now rotate this. The support is not getting influenced, so that's a good thing. That means we fixed the support main joint, skin weights. Coming to the next joint, so select the mesh again. Since we already have the tool over here selected, we just need to click on this to open this paint skin weights tool window. Now with that done, coming on to the next bob one joint. As you can see, the bob one joint should only influence this first bob. Only the first bob should be white and the rest should be black, but this is gray, so we need to do that quickly. Okay, so let's turn this white first. Okay, increase the brush size a bit, color over this, turn it up, color over this, and turn it white. Okay, so that's done. Now coming to this mesh, what do we know? That this has to be black, because we don't want the influence of this bob one joint to be influencing the bob 2. So we just need to make this black. So as you know, it has very little vertex, and the only vertex we have over here is which is inside over here. So just reduce the brush size and just click on this vertex. So that will turn this one black. Now we want this mesh to be white, right? So it's having a little gray over here, so just paint over it. So that looks fine. So with that done, you can just hit Q once and check this once more. So that looks good. Let's check this joint now. So that looks perfect. There is no influence on the joints on the mesh above, right? Great work. Now coming to the next joint, skin weights bob 2. So we have a similar issue over here. We'll fix it in a similar way. White, this is B, B, increase the size, paint this white. The rods are fine, just the bobs are having some issue, so just check that up. Okay, that's sorted. Now we need to just paint this rod black, so turn the value to 0, come over here, inside B, left click, scroll down, click near the vertex, and there you go. Right, so that's sorted. Coming to bob 3, and the bob 3 is not having any influence as such as we see for now. We can see that with this joint When if we rotate this, you can see it is causing some deformation over here. It's influencing this part. Maybe the second end joint or the end joint is influencing. So by selecting the end joint, everything is prominent, but it's better always to just try it out. So we can just what we can do is we can just flood it. Okay, so with the end joint selected, we can just flood it to black. So that way you can see as soon as I flood it, flood means we're filling the color just like a fill bucket. We're just filling the entire color at once with the flood option. So with that option, as you see, that now the problem has happened. So that influence was due to not the joint bob 3 but the end joint. Okay, so the end joint was causing this issue. So so you can always flood it, and if you want any particular joint to, let's say this joint, to affect this mesh. Okay, so now it's black, right? So the end joint is black and bob 3 is white, right? So if you want the bob 3 to affect it fully, okay, affect this mesh fully, you can just turn on the value to full white and you can just apply flood. That will completely turn this to white. In case you have any errors, let's say by mistake you have painted this black and you want this to be sorted to white completely, then you can just turn this to full and just let it. That will flood the entire mesh at once. So you don't have to do painting manually in that case. Right? So by this method, we can just sort out if you have any issue in a particular mesh, you can just select that individually and you can use the flood option from here with the value of black or white, whatever. So this is a very simple and basic rig tutorial. So you need learning the basics of it. As we go into complex structures and complex objects and characters, obviously the techniques and tools develop and you need to learn more. But once you know this basics, it's going to help you all your life. And you can thank me for it. Coming to the end joint, let's check if it influences anything. Meanwhile, if you can't see anything, never mind. You can always check using the joints, just rotate it. So you can see this third joint, bob 3 joint is influencing over here, which we don't want. So with that with that rotation there, we can always fix it. So you can just click on this mesh over here and you can click on the paint skin weight option and you can click on the bob 3 and let's see what's happening here. But if it turns down to 0, okay, the influence is on top, right? So if we paint over here, we see as soon as we paint black, it's getting fixed automatically. Not automatically, just because we're painting, it's getting fixed. Okay, so that's sorted. Let's hit Q, check it, and that looks fine. Let's check this joint once more. If it's doing any kind of mischief, no, everything looks fine, not influencing anything else apart from, and this looks great as well. So with that done, we are done with this skin weights painting. So all should select. Let's check out. It's all working properly, perfectly. So that's done. We need to add some controllers for the animators to use it and to key them for animation. Okay, so they don't need to mess with the joints mesh. They just need to work on the controllers. So let's get the controllers done. So for creating the controllers, we can create it from the create option, nerves primitives, and you can choose the circle shape. Okay, you can create any other shape as well. Square, circle is the best one for it for now. You can click on that, or you can come to the curved surface option and you'll find the circles here as well. So anyways, now that we have it, we can go to the top view and see the circle is already created. Okay, So once with that circle created, let's position it. Let's say this curve or circle is going to be the controller, which is going to control this first or the bob 3. We need to place it absolutely at the vertex of the joint. So hit V because it's at the vertex and just click and drag. So now it snaps it to the proper vertex. Okay, now we can just scale it down a bit. Okay, that's enough for getting a hold of it. And let's open the outliner now. Okay, so we have, this is the first controller, rather this is the controller which is going to be for the bob 3. Okay, so we can just copy it and we can name it bob 3, controller is CTR, enter. So we have that first one done. Now coming to the Control D, W, moving up. Okay, so now we are having this one, so just snap it with V. Okay, so that's your bob 2 controller, so that's going to control the bob 2. Control D, snap it to bob 1, V, and just snap it, right? So that's your bob 1 controller. So bob 1 controller is set. So all the 3 controllers for all the 3 parts of the pendulum or the bobs are ready. Next, we need one controller for the master or the main controller. Okay, to control this entire pendulum. So you can just duplicate the same one, and this time we're going to snap it to this joint, right? So don't worry, you can just scale it up. Okay, now in order to change the shape of the controller, since these are spheres, a circular controller looks good and apt, but the support is rectangular. So if you want to make it rectangular, you can go to control vertex and just edit using the control vertex of this curve to make it look rectangular. You can turn on the symmetry, that way you don't have to select it thrice, you can just do it in one shot. Okay, yeah, I think this looks fine. Perfect. So with that controller, master controller ready as well, and the rest of the controllers ready, it's very important to select all of them. I already have a shortcut created for deleting history, freeze transformation, modify, freeze transformations. Okay, with that done, don't forget to name this as the main controller. So this is going to be the main controller, the master controller. So you can just mention it as the main controller. There you go. Okay, and that main controller should be on top, right? Rest, you know, this should be above this, this should be above this, and this is the third one. So bob 3, bob, oh sorry, we forgot to name this bob 1. That's sorted. Okay, so with that done, now it's time for us to parent them. Okay, so very quickly, you know already, child, shift select the parent, hit P. Child, shift select the parent, hit P. Child, shift select the parent, hit P. So now we have the curves parented in the right hierarchy. Okay, with that done, now it's time for us to join or connect the controllers to the joints. Now this is a very important part. We are going to use constraints. So we're going to use the constraints for connecting the joints. to the controllers. So no p parent for this. Okay, p parent only for controller to controller in this case. Okay, so for that, since it's a constraint based connection, it's not the child first and the parent, but the parent first. In this case, the parent is the controller and this is the child. So controller 3 and the Bob 3. So the parent and the child. Move on to constraints. So these constraints basically constraint the joint to particular attributes. So since this is only going to rotate, we'll be using the orient constraint. So you can just click on the option box. If we have to reset, we'll reset and we'll see this is the default setup. So don't forget to turn on the maintain offset. So just should be checked on. With that done, just hit apply. Okay, as soon as you hit apply, you can see the rotations are locked. Okay, so now the joint rotations will be influenced by this curve. Just do the same thing for rest of the controllers and the bobs. So orient constraint only apply with maintain offset. For this one, with maintain offset. Great. So with that done, we come to the main controller and the main joint. Okay, so before that, we can just check how this is working. We can just check how this is working. Shift select. That looks great. Okay, now coming to the main controller and the main joint. Now for the main joint and the main controller, it is not just going to influence its rotation. It can be moved. We should be able to move it. We should be able to scale it. So there we go. So for the constraints, this time we need to use the parent constraint for the main joint and the main controller, right? So this is the parent, this is the child. Okay, constraint, parent constraint, option box, check that the maintain offset is on, apply. There you go. So as you can see, the parent constraint controls the translations, that is for moving, and the rotations. Okay, so that's done. You also need to constrain its scale. So we'll be also using the scale constraint. So again, don't forget to turn on the maintain offset option. Apply. So as we do that, you can see the scale is also being locked. So now the master controller is actually the master. So we can move the entire thing along with that. We can rotate the entire thing along with that, as well as we can do that rotation for individual controllers as well. But if you take notice and if you scale, okay, slight issue is there, right? So the most important part, we are coming to the last step. The joint setup, the skin bind done, the controller setup, the controllers connected to the joints using constraints, orient constraints for rotation, parent constraint for the main controller, scale constraint for the main controller. So the main controller has two constraints. We need to also do a child parent with the main joint and the main controller hitting P button. So that's also required, so that this time when we scale it, it all scales together. So there's no issue with the scaling. It's done with the 1. It moves together perfectly and it rotates together perfectly. So friends, I hope you enjoyed this basic rigging tutorial, rigging pendulum, which I've tried to cover all the major parts and all the major tools and techniques required for rigging. So we have over here, you can see in the outliner, the main controller, which hosts all the controllers, and the main joint, which has all the joints and the constraints within that, if you turn them on. Okay, and the mesh, we are having it separately in another group, but it is being influenced by this rig. So that's the rig setup and that's the mesh setup. So like the tutorial, share it. If you have any comments and queries, let me know. And hope you're having a good day. Enjoy, keep learning, stay safe. Bye, tata. See you in the next tutorial.